In May 1976, while visiting her sister in California, a 25-year-old stepped out for a quiet evening walk and never returned. A breakthrough in forensic genealogy revealed the identity of her perpetrator and brought answers to a mystery of nearly 50 years. Karen Percifield was born on October 12, 1950. She was a native of Oregon, Ohio. Her parents, Mildred Parrish and Bruce H. Percifield, raised her in a modest, loving home. Karen grew up alongside her three sisters, Kimberly, Lynn, and Ann. At 25 years old, Karen had gone to visit one of her sisters in California, but this visit would be her last. Karen had no idea that her decision to travel that day would lead to devastating consequences. On May 20th, 1976, while visiting her sister, Karen stepped out for a walk in the evening and never returned. As hours turned into days, concern grew, and the search for Karen intensified. 8 days later, on May 28th, deputies in Santa Cruz County were dispatched to a scene near Aptos Village Park in response to reports of a suspicious demise. There, lying in the brush, was the body of a young woman. The body was soon identified as that of Karen Percifield. The confirmation of her identity brought an unbearable weight to her grieving family, shattering any remaining hope that she might be found alive. The cause of demise pointed immediately to foul play, and the case was swiftly ruled a slaying. The investigators worked tirelessly in the days following the discovery, combing through evidence and interviewing anyone who might offer a lead. But despite their efforts, the case grew cold. More than 40 years after the crime, in 2019, the Santa Cruz County Sheriff's investigators made the decision to revisit the cold case. Advances in forensic technology offered new hope, and several pieces of evidence collected from the original investigation were submitted to the California Department of Justice Bureau of Forensic Services. From this effort, a male DNA profile was successfully developed. However, the momentum was short-lived. When the profile was run through existing criminal DNA databases, there was no match. The individual was not in the system, and once again, investigators found themselves without a name, only a genetic fingerprint without a known source. Determined not to let the case grow cold again, the Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Office took another step forward. In the fall of 2023, they submitted the forensic evidence to Othram. Using forensic-grade genome sequencing and genetic genealogy methods, Othram was able to build a comprehensive DNA profile from the evidence. This allowed investigators to trace the suspect's family lineage and narrow down possible matches. The new approach, combining science with genealogical research, led to a long-awaited breakthrough. In early April 2025, the investigators were able to name Richard Somerhalder as the individual responsible for ending the life of Karen. Back in 1976, during the initial stages of the investigation, Somerhalder had already caught the attention of authorities. He was considered a person of interest, but at the time, there simply was not enough evidence to move forward with charges. Just a few months after Karen's case was opened, in September 1976, Somerhalder was arrested in connection with two other cases in Santa Cruz County. 31-year-old Vicky Bazori and 21-year-old Mary Gorman. The charges solidified suspicions about his violent tendencies. He was convicted and served 8.5 years in prison before being released on parole. After his release, Somerhalder left California, disappearing from the area where his crimes had left a lasting mark. The detectives turned their attention back to Somerhalder. They began the process of collecting a reference DNA sample to confirm the match to the profile developed from the crime scene evidence. However, their investigation hit a final, immovable obstacle. Somerhalder had passed away in 1994. Though his demise meant he would never face trial, the identification still carried significant weight. Sheriff's officials reflected on the case as an example of enduring commitment. The sheriff stated, "No matter how much time has passed, we will never stop seeking the truth." Karen's sister, Annie Goheen, said that her nickname was Cookie. She said, "She was as sweet as she was beautiful. No matter what, and this is a hard pill to swallow, no matter what you have to forgive, because if you do not, you will carry that hate and that resentment. And I felt that for so long because I was angry and mad. Karen's daughter, Meadow Shoemake, was 6 years old when her mother's life was taken. She said, yeah, it has been a lifelong, obsession of mine to want to know what happened, why, and all that, and who. Like I said, your mind wanders to far out places when you do not know the truth. So it is like a bittersweet justice. I am really happy that there must be other people that are going to feel the same way as me. In August 2018, a woman's lifeless body was discovered in Spain. It would take years for a breakthrough fingerprint match to identify the woman. On August 4th, 2018, a woman's body was discovered hanging in a poultry shed attached to a farmhouse in Santiago Diaz, a small town in Girona, Spain. The discovery shocked the local community, as the body appeared to have been there for some time. The woman, whose appearance seemed out of place in the isolated location, had no identification documents on her, and local residents did not recognize her. Upon closer inspection, the investigators found a tattoo on the woman's left forearm that read "Success" in Hebrew. This detail stood out, as it was a unique and personal mark, potentially offering a significant lead. However, despite efforts to trace the tattoo's meaning or connection, the investigation turned up no immediate connections to anyone in the area or beyond. The autopsy revealed that the cause of demise was hanging, and based on the evidence, the demise was initially ruled that she ended her own life. There were no signs of foul play or external injuries, which led investigators to believe that it was self-inflicted. Despite the conclusion, the circumstances surrounding the discovery remained suspicious. The local police, alongside forensic experts, attempted to piece together any possible clues that might reveal the woman's identity. They looked into missing persons cases across Spain, hoping to find a match, but nothing seemed to connect the dots. Despite efforts to circulate her image and gather information from the public, no one came forward with information that could help solve the case. The investigation was slow, compounded by language barriers and international complications, and unfortunately, the case went cold. In October 2024, 6 years later, Interpol launched the Identify Me campaign, an international initiative designed to solve the mystery surrounding the identities of 46 women found deceased under unexplained circumstances across Europe. Among the cases submitted for review was 33-year-old Ainoha Izaga Ibieta Limas, whose disappearance had remained unresolved for years. Ainoha was born in 1980. She was a Paraguayan woman who moved to Spain in 2013, seeking a new start and possibly a more peaceful life, far from the familiarity of her home country. Regular communication with her family helped to reassure them that she was safe and settling into her new life in Spain. However, this routine came to a halt in mid-2018 when her family noticed the sudden and unexplained break in contact. They grew increasingly concerned, trying to reach out through multiple channels, but their efforts were met with silence. As weeks passed without any word from Ainoha, her family's worries deepened. Her brother, unable to uncover any explanation or trace of her whereabouts, took the brave step of reporting her disappearance to the Paraguayan authorities in late 2018. The missing persons report prompted authorities to investigate Ainoha's sudden disappearance, but the case was met with challenges from the start. Given the fact that she had moved to Spain years prior, the international scope of the situation made it harder to track down any leads. Spanish authorities, recognizing the significance of Ainoha's case, submitted her details as part of the initiative, hoping the Identify Me campaign would offer new leads and the potential for identification. In March 2025, a breakthrough came when a fingerprint match was found in Paraguay's national database. Paraguayan authorities, while revisiting Ainoha's case, managed to match the fingerprints from the body discovered in Santiago Diaz with those in their national database. The discovery marked the first successful transcontinental identification under the Identify Me program. While the mystery of her identity was solved, questions about how Ainoha ended up in such an isolated location and whether she truly ended her own life continued to haunt both her family and investigators. In November 2019, in the quiet city of Perris, California, a 22-year-old man was found fatally shot. Despite swift response by law enforcement and an active investigation, no arrests were made, and the case eventually went cold until a major breakthrough came. Santiago Diaz was born in 1977. He was a resident of Perris, California. Tragically, Santiago's life did not follow the path he might have imagined. Whatever hope he had for the future was ultimately cut short. The tragic incident unfolded in November 2019. On that day, Riverside County Sheriff's deputies were dispatched to the 700 block of East 7th Street following reports of a shooting. What began as a routine call for service quickly escalated into a scene of chaos and irreversible loss. When the authorities arrived at the location, they discovered 3 individuals suffering from gunshot wounds. Emergency responders moved swiftly to assess the victims and provide aid. 2 of the individuals were quickly transported to a nearby hospital. Fortunately, their injuries were determined to be non-life-threatening. Santiago Diaz, however, did not survive the attack. Despite emergency efforts at the scene, he was pronounced deceased. His life, which until then had been largely unknown to the public, suddenly became the focus of attention in the wake of this senseless violence. The demise of a 22-year-old under such circumstances sent ripples through the community. The Riverside Sheriff's Central Unit was assigned to lead the investigation. Detectives combed through evidence, conducted interviews, and followed multiple leads in their pursuit of answers. The nature of the attack, along with the presence of multiple victims, underscored the seriousness of the case and the urgency to find those responsible. However, despite extensive investigative efforts, no significant breakthroughs occurred. Over time, leads began to dwindle, and the momentum behind the investigation slowed. The case, once a top priority, gradually slipped into the category of unsolved crimes, leaving those who knew Santiago with little closure. No arrests were ever made in connection with the shooting. The case went cold, and with it, any immediate hope for accountability faded into uncertainty. However, in late 2024, 5 years after the case was opened, a significant development breathed new life into the long-dormant case. The detectives with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department revisited Santiago Diaz's unsolved case after uncovering new evidence. The nature of this evidence has not been publicly disclosed, but it was enough to prompt the authorities to officially reopen the investigation. With renewed focus, investigators began piecing together the timeline and re-examining past statements and forensic details. This fresh look at the case brought clarity that had previously been missing. After thorough analysis, the detectives identified Jeremy Whittle, a 26-year-old resident of Perris, as one of the individuals suspected to be involved in the 2019 shooting. On March 27, 2025, Whittle was taken into custody by the authorities. His arrest marked the first major breakthrough in the case after more than 5 years of uncertainty. Following his arrest, Whittle was booked into the Robert Presley Detention Center. At this time, no additional details have been released regarding his alleged role in the shooting, nor has it been confirmed whether other suspects are being pursued. Still, the arrest represented a critical turning point in an investigation that had once appeared to be at a standstill. The case remains active and ongoing. Investigators continue to search for more answers, aiming to piece together the full story of what happened on that November day in 2019. Anyone with information about this investigation is urged to contact Riverside County Sheriff's Department, Master Investigator S. Denham or Master Investigator V. Magana of the Central Unit at 951-955-2772. When people think of notorious street gangs, names like the Bloods or the Crips often come up. but one gang stands out for its sheer brutality and global reach. Born on the streets of Los Angeles, California, and fueled by civil war, MS-13 quickly evolved into a ruthless criminal empire. Known for their savage tactics, wielding machetes, carrying out ritualistic slayings, and enforcing loyalty through fear, this gang does not just dominate neighborhoods, it decimates them. From extortion and illegal substance trafficking to human smuggling and public executions, their crimes span continents. This is not just a gang, it is a transnational menace. Mara Salvatrucha, commonly known as MS-13, is an international criminal gang that originated in Los Angeles, California during the 1980s. It was established by Salvadoran immigrants who had fled the brutal civil wars in Central America. These immigrants settled primarily in the neighborhoods of Pico, Union, Westlake, and Rampart. Despite escaping violent conflict in their homeland, Salvadorans arriving in the United States throughout the 1970s and 1980s were largely refused asylum and instead classified as undocumented immigrants. This legal status forced many to enter the country without documentation, leading them to concentrate in urban centers with large undocumented populations like Los Angeles. Initially, MS-13 was not a criminal enterprise, but rather a loose group of young Salvadoran immigrants who shared a love for heavy metal music. However, living in a city rife with gang activity and racial hostility, especially toward undocumented immigrants, placed the Salvadoran community in a vulnerable position. Out of a need for protection against established gangs, composed mostly of Mexicans, Asians, and African Americans, MS-13 began to evolve. Over time, it transformed into a gang with a mission to defend its own members. Some early members incorporated elements of Satanism into the group, and while that influence has waned, traces of it remain in the gang's symbols. The gang's transformation into a more structured and dangerous criminal organization was accelerated under the leadership of Ernesto Diaz. As a former member of Salvadoran Special Forces, Diaz had received training in Panama from the United States Green Berets. When he took control of an MS-13 clique in 1990, he applied military discipline and strategic planning to the gang's activities, leading to a rise in power and influence. Around this period, MS-13 developed a rivalry with the 18th Street Gang. Although the two groups were initially allies, particularly as both were open to Salvadoran recruits, their alliance ended violently after a fatal dispute in 1989, reportedly sparked by a conflict over a girl. The event triggered ongoing retaliation between the two gangs, creating a cycle of violence that continues to this day. As MS-13 members were increasingly arrested in the Los Angeles area, many of them were deported to their home countries. Among them was Jose Abrego, a high-ranking figure within the gang, who was deported 4 times. These deportations inadvertently helped the gang expand its influence beyond U.S. borders. In El Salvador, where gang activity had been minimal prior to the 1990s, the deported MS-13 members began to recruit and organize. According to the Los Angeles Times, U.S. deportation policies played a significant role in the gang's growth, both domestically and abroad, as deported gangsters found a power vacuum waiting to be filled in their homeland. The Salvadoran Civil War, which lasted over a decade and ended in 1992, had left deep scars on the nation. Government forces, including U.S.-trained squads, targeted civilians and Catholic clergy, often using terror tactics. Child soldiers were conscripted, and human rights abuses were widespread, largely perpetrated by the military. This period of intense violence destabilized the country, making it fertile ground for organized criminal groups like MS-13 to take root upon the return of deported members. After the war, the Chapultepec Peace Accords required the Salvadoran government to form a new civilian police force to replace the military in law enforcement roles. However, the political party in power, ARENA, which had ties to the wartime military regime, delayed this transition. In response to rising gang violence that peaked in the 1990s, El Salvador's government implemented aggressive anti-gang measures known as mano dura and super mano dura during the Arena presidencies. These policies, rather than dismantling gang operations, appeared to strengthen groups like MS-13, according to both observers and gang members. When the National Civil Police was finally established in 1993, it included members of the former military, some of whom were known war criminals. This weakened law enforcement, giving MS-13 an opportunity to establish a stronghold. Furthermore, the availability of leftover weapons from the war and ongoing economic difficulties allowed the gang to thrive. Today, MS-13 generates revenue through arms trafficking, extortion, and targeted assassinations. On July 13, 2003, 17-year-old Brenda Paz was found fatally stabbed near Virginia's Shenandoah River. Formerly affiliated with MS-13, she had turned informant for the FBI, providing details about the gang's criminal operations. Pregnant at the time of the crime, Brenda's life was ended by individuals she once considered friends. Just over a year later, on December 23, 2004, one of the most brutal MS-13 attacks occurred in Camelicon, Honduras, when gang members opened fire on a civilian bus, taking the lives of 28 people, mostly women and children. The massacre, carried out to protest the Honduran government's plan to reinstate the demise penalty, led to several convictions, while one accused mastermind's life was ended later in prison. Also in 2004, the FBI established the MS-13 National Gang Task Force in the United States, aiming to disrupt the gang's operations through cooperation with local law enforcement and deportation efforts, an approach that inadvertently aided MS-13's international spread. In 2006, two high-profile MS-13 cases made headlines. On May 13th, Ernesto "Smokey" Miranda, a founding member who had since renounced gang life and begun studying law, was slain at his home in El Salvador. The following month in Houston, Texas, teenager Gabriel Granillo was stabbed by Ashley Page Benton during a park altercation, drawing national attention to the gang's presence. In New York, Julio Chavez allegedly ended the life of a man in 2007 after mistaking him for a Bloods member due to the red sweatshirt he wore. That same year, Connecticut's Vietnam Veterans Memorial was defaced with MS-13 graffiti and racial threats. In June 2008, Edwin Ramos, a 21-year-old MS-13 member, fatally shot Anthony Bologna and his two sons in San Francisco after a minor traffic dispute. The authorities believed that the family was wrongly identified as rival gang members. A few months later, Jonathan Ratana was convicted of taking the life of Miguel Angel Deras in Ohio in what was believed to be a gang initiation act. In 2009, Colorado and California authorities arrested 20 MS-13 members, seizing weapons, illegal substances, and cash. That year, 3 gang members shot 2 innocent civilians in Long Island, causing Edgar Villalobos' life to be ended after misidentifying them as rivals. Federal agents uncovered a chilling 2009 assassination plot against an immigration and customs enforcement officer in New York. MS-13 members, allegedly acting on orders from leaders in El Salvador, planned the hit in retaliation for numerous arrests. The plot was revealed by Walter Duke Torres, who was being held in custody. Meanwhile, in 2011 and 2012, numerous gang members were convicted of racketeering and slaying in San Francisco, including Danilo Velasquez, who was sentenced to life for mistaking victims as Norteños members based on their red clothing. Under President Mauricio Funes of the FMLN party, an unofficial truce was negotiated between MS-13 and the 18th Street Gang in 2012. In exchange for a reduction in crime rates, the government provided incentives, including transfers to lower security prisons and rewards for surrendered firearms. While the crime rates dropped, extortion remained rampant, and gang structures grew stronger. Public disapproval of government leniency and lack of transparency led to the truce's downfall when Salvador Sanchez Corén, also of FMLN, took office in 2014 and reinstated hardline tactics. The truce's collapse in 2015 resulted in a violent resurgence, with El Salvador recording the world's highest crime rate that year. Gangs, having used the truce to expand and reorganize, were even more dangerous. Subsequent investigations into the truce revealed government corruption, including accusations that negotiators encouraged gang violence to maintain leverage in talks. Some participants were later prosecuted for their roles. The U.S. has pursued MS-13 through multiple federal initiatives. Operation Community Shield and coordinated international crackdowns have led to thousands of arrests. In 2012, the U.S. Treasury classified MS-13 as a transnational criminal organization, imposing sanctions on its leaders, including the imprisoned Elmer Canales Rivera. On Long Island, MS-13's brutality persisted, with cases like the alleged 2010 execution of a 2-year-old child and his mother, and the 2015 slaying of Jonathan Cardona Hernandez by William Castellano over suspected gang affiliation. From 2016 to 2018, a series of brutal crimes tied to MS-13 members underscored the gang's ongoing threat. These included the luring end of Jordi Mejia in Maryland using a fake Facebook account, the case of Raymond Wood in Virginia, and the 2011 crime against Julio Matute by Walter Gomez in New Jersey, who later fled but was apprehended in Virginia. Further operations, such as Operation Raging Bull in 2017, saw hundreds of arrests across the U.S. and Central America. The Houston authorities arrested 2 MS-13 members for holding 3 girls hostage and subjecting them to prolonged abuse. That same year, the Center for Immigration Studies documented 506 MS-13-related criminal cases in the U.S. from 2012 to 2018. In 2018 and beyond, law enforcement continued to dismantle high-level MS-13 operations. East Coast gang leader Miguel Angel Correa Diaz was arraigned on conspiracy charges in New York, prompting retaliatory threats against police. That same year, Carla Morales escaped GPS monitoring after helping lure Jose Villanueva to his end. She was eventually captured in 2023 and accepted a 30-year sentence. In 2020, the U.S. Justice Department pursued the end-of-life penalty against Elmer Martinez for the case of 2 minors in Virginia. In 2021, terrorism charges were brought against 14 imprisoned MS-13 leaders in El Salvador. One high-profile target is Yulan Adonai Arjaga Carrillas, alias Porky, the alleged MS-13 leader in Honduras. He was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted list in 2021 with a $100,000 reward. In 2023, U.S. authorities increased the bounty to $5 million and sanctioned him under a federal executive order. Other fugitives include MS-13 members wanted by the FBI and DHS, some of whom have been captured and deported, while others remain at large. MS-13's presence in political discourse has been especially prominent in U.S. Republican narratives. Although MS-13 represents less than 1% of U.S. gang members, its violent reputation has made it a focal point in debates over immigration and sanctuary city policies. Despite claims of a surge, official data has not supported these assertions. MS-13 continues to engage in illegal enterprises, including illegal substance trafficking, extortion, and violent crimes, both in the U.S. and Central America. On April 25, 2025, 45-year-old Juan Carlos Rivas Morellera, Stocky, a high-ranking member and leader of MS-13, was sentenced to life. On April 29th, the last of 7 MS-13 gang members has been sentenced for a double slaying in 2022. 31-year-old Hector Ramirez Cuervo was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison.